Tim served as our president in 2006-2007, when the Rotary theme was Lead the Way, and next year will serve as our district governor. Murph is the consummate Rotarian and has been on countless international service trips, and a few years ago he was awarded Rotary International's Service Above Self Award, which is awarded annually to a maximum of 150 Rotarians out of 1.2 million Rotarians around the world. This is Rotary's highest honor. I asked Murph what book he had on his book stand, and he said, My Rotary Journey by Wooge Bayan. Murph?
Edina Rotary, you are humbling, but you really have a treat in Ward Brehm today. Ward is a successful Twin Cities entrepreneur, world leader in African humanitarian efforts, and nationally known public speaker and commentator on relief and development in Africa. He has served the last two presidential administrations as the chairman of the United States African Development Foundation. The USADF is an independent federal agency established to support African-led development that grows community enterprises by providing seed capital and technical support. Ward brought his message as an advocate for the poor in Africa to the 2008 National Prayer Breakfast, where he gave the keynote address with our President and First Lady in attendance. He was the first business person from the business community to even be asked by Congress to address the annual gathering in Washington, D.C. In 2008, Ward was awarded the Presidential Citizenship Medal, our country's second highest civilian honor, for his work in Africa at an Oval Office ceremony. Ward is the author of 2 books on his experiences in Africa, Life Through a Different Lens and White Man Walking. Ward's 3rd book, Dispatches from the Heart, will be published in 2015. Ward and his wife, Chris, live in Minneapolis and have 3 adult children, Andy, Michael, and Sarah. He has a long-time tie as a 1969 graduate of Edina High School, and he was also a confirmation student of our own Arthur Rauner. It may come as no surprise to this group that Arthur's encouragement, and Ward may lean a little bit towards the word nagging, was instrumental in his first trip to Africa. That then seeded his passion for humanitarian aid there ever since. Ward was inducted in 2006 into the Edina Education Fund Hall of Fame. Personally, Ward has become a mentor to me, which in turn has given Edina Rotary valued insight through our many projects in East Africa. His humble, it's not about me presentation and leadership style is an inspiration to all those he addresses. It is my belief that when we have an audience, you need to be passionate about your cause. Edina Rotary, sustainable humanitarian aid, and his love for Africa literally ooze out of Ward. Please help me welcome a great friend to Edina Rotary, Ward Brehm. Thank you.
Well, my favorite Edina Rotarian, no offense, Tim, Arthur Rauner isn't here today. He's out in New Hampshire, but he's a hero of mine, as is evidenced by, some of you may find this familiar. I call this actually my Arthur Rauner starter set. I like Arthur. I started adding one of these for every trip to Africa, but actually after about the 8th or 9th trip, I decided not to add anymore. It had nothing to do with my covenant with God. It actually was starting to affect my golf swing. I had every intention of talking about Africa, and somewhere along the way, earlier this week, I changed my mind. And It's such a gorgeous day. It's such a beautiful day outside. Actually, I'm amazed that more of you didn't play hooky. I think if I were you, I would have. Are here, and I just thought maybe Africa, the dark continent of Africa, might be kind of a dark topic. So I picked another one. I'm going to give some reflections on dying. I've never talked about this before. So if you don't like it, I promise I'll give you all your money back. Over the past 7 years, I've felt personally like a little bit like the biblical character Job from a medical perspective. To begin with, I was diagnosed with polycythemia vera. It's a very rare, currently benign form of blood cancer. It's thankfully been kept under control with oral chemotherapy that's had very few side effects. A year later, and when I went down for a follow-up checkup, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, which again is extraordinarily rare, especially for someone who at the time was just approaching 60. Last year, at age 62, I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer, which required surgery that was successful. And then to top it off, I had a follow-up CT scan and related blood tests that indicated that I also have chronic lymphomic leukemia. The latter, thankfully, is also indolent. It's a medical word. It's a word I never understood before. The doctor gave me good news, bad news. Oh, I've got quite a bit of bad news. What could possibly be the good news? The good news is that I'm indolent, which means lazy, sleepy, tired, inactive. And that is the current status of all of my various ailments. Okay, so why this pity party? Well, following this last diagnosis, I had a very, very candid conversation with my internist at the University of Minnesota, who's become a very close friend. I asked him, how long do I have to live? He said, that's an absolutely ridiculous question, impossible to answer. If all your conditions remain indolent and under control, it'll be a very long time. But I pressed in. If you had to bet, how long? I can't say. What if your life depended on it? 10 years, he said. That got my attention. But once I mulled it around in my mind, it seemed like a pretty fair deal. I guess in my own way of thinking, anything less than 10 years would seem a little stingy on God's part. Anything more than 10 years, a bonus. I've lived an incredible life. So many adventures, so many opportunities, so many blessings, so many friends. I've already lived far more than my share. In fact, I don't even have a bucket list. I started thinking, what if somehow I knew for a fact that I would die 10 years from now? What if God literally told me, you have 10 years to live? Obviously, none of us knows the day or hour. But as an intellectual exercise, I wondered, what if I did know? What effect would it have on me? Would it change my life? The answer was a resounding, almost obvious yes. But then came the hard part. How? How would it change? What would I do? How would I live that last 10 years if I knew that was all the time I had left? So I actually began to put together a paper. It was my 10-year plan. I called a very dear friend of mine, a mentor for many years, a fellow by the name of Doug Coe, who lives in Washington, D.C. He's an extraordinarily gifted man of faith, and is probably the most famous person that no one's ever heard of. Friends of heads of state all over the world, and the kind of the Wizard of Oz behind the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington. And over the phone, I told Doug about this intellectual exercise of putting together my plan, and he immediately said, "You need to come out here right away. I want to talk to you about your plan." So after a big hug and we exchanged our various pleasantries, Doug leaned over in his chair and he said, "So now, Ward, I want to talk about your 10-year plan. I mean, have you put anything to paper on this?" And I said, yeah, actually I have." And he goes, "Oh, great." He goes, "You didn't happen to bring it with you, did you?" And I said, yeah, I did." He goes, "Can I take a look?" I said, "Yeah, it's got it right here." And I gave it to him, and he took my plan without ever losing eye contact with me. This is the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard of in my life. You don't need a 10-year plan. What you need is a 3-day plan. If you had 3 days to live, how would you live your life? And then spend the rest of your life doing that. As I considered what he said, I realized that it was true. If I had 3 days to live, I'd bring my family around me. I'd teach my children as best I could all the lessons of my life. Actually, that's the primary motivation behind the book that I'm currently writing, Dispatches from the Heart. I need to be really, really clear here, particularly because there are a number of people in this room that I know well. All of my medical conditions remain indolent. In fact, I'd be willing to arm wrestle most of you. There's a good chance that they'll remain indolent for a long, long time. Thus, a good chance that I may be able to outlive you. I'm not a rookie in this dying business. 5 years ago, my wife, Chris, was diagnosed with an inoperable tumor. And Mayo had exhausted all medical remedy, and they sent us home with her life expectancy determined by weeks or months. Long story short, we're the beneficiary of a flat-out miracle. 5 years ago in May, she was pronounced cured by the oncologists at Mayo. I learned the huge lesson of thankfulness throughout that ordeal. I also discovered that thankfulness trumps every other emotion that there is. It's virtually impossible to be grumpy and thankful at the same time. You can't be thankful and at the same time envious, angry, or resentful. Thankfulness trumps every other emotion. And I'm filled with thankfulness for my own reprieve of indolence. Yet the 10-year window still remained in my imagination, and I decided to explore it more in depth, at least academically. It wasn't long ago I was having lunch with my business partner, Jeff Bird, when out of the blue he said, "You know, Ward, we don't have very long left to sacrifice." Now, only he could come up with this. I call him John the Baptist. I mean, if there's light and dark, very, very serious guy, and I love him dearly. I had no idea what he was talking about. Well, he said, think about it. We believe that when we die, we go to heaven, and in heaven there is no more suffering and there's no more pain. And there'll be no more opportunity to serve God or the people here on earth that he wants us to. I'd never even remotely considered that proposition, but after pondering it for just a little bit, realized it's true. So with my hypothetical 10 years left, it certainly would make sense to try to make up a bit for whatever lost time. Turning over self-control of my life is proving very difficult, but a continuing adventure in faith. I realized that with a 10-year window, I would be much more focused on being intentional with my time. When I was young, I was immortal, bulletproof. Actually, based upon the escapades of my youth growing up here in Edina, I actually was. There are more than a few stories I see Skip Thomas laughing because it is so true. There are more stories, and we'll save those until sometime way after the 10 years. Even at middle age, I ridiculously never seriously considered or contemplated that someday I might die. My daughter, Sarah, a few years ago, hearing myself refer to myself as being middle-aged, said, so Dad, do you really think you're going to live to be 120? Thanks for that, sweetie. I had never considered with any seriousness my own mortality. 20 years ago, I remember my mentor, Wheelock Whitney, saying, I want to die young, at the oldest age possible. I was having lunch with him just a few weeks ago, when out of the blue he changed the subject and he said, Ward, I have something very serious that I need to tell you. With a sense of foreboding, I said, what? I have a terminal disease. Oh my gosh. Reached over and I grabbed his hand and was fighting back tears. I said, oh my gosh, Wheelock, tell me about it. What's going on? I'm 85 years old. So you tell me, do I have 5 years? 10 years? 15? Word, I'm terminal. Our culture today is in denial regarding death. This generation is the first to seem to believe that we can find heaven here on earth. Death is an abstract thought that only impacts others until it impacts us. And it will, of course, without exception. So thinking in the finite has become a very, very interesting exercise. Theoretically, if I only have 10 Christmases, 10 summers at the cabin, 10 of my children's birthdays, what impact does that have on the way that I spend my time? It calls the question about being intentional with the way that we live, totally in the present, when the future has limits. Perhaps more importantly, I've realized the danger of the self-pity syndrome. When it came to both my and Chris's medical trials and tribulations, it was natural, probably normal. I think okay to briefly ask the question, why me? And the answers, of course, remain a deep mystery that only God one day will be able to answer. But after pondering the issue of fairness, even briefly, the question got reversed, and I found myself thinking, why not me? After all, I have the resources to be treated by the best doctors in the world. Isn't it fair for me to deal with this? Rather than the poor widow in Tanzania who travels 20 miles with a sick child on her back only to reach the clinic and find that the 50-cent medicine that could save her child's life is out of stock and her child dies. That's not fair. Not even close. But more significantly, prolonged self-pity is an extremely slippery slope towards bitterness, and that's a truly wretched place to end up. So as I contemplated what I would do if I knew for certain that I had only 10 more years, the first realization hit immediately. I needed to leave the company that I founded 40 years ago. So I did. I've always been scared to death of the word retirement. It has nothing but negative connotations for me. It always seemed like an intentional downgrade into irrelevancy. With good reason. As I overheard my wife, I only heard one end of the phone call, but obviously the person, her friend on the other end, must have said, what's it going to be like when Ward retires? because her answer was, well, I don't know, I guess he'll just be shuffling around all day in his robe and slippers. So rather than say that I'm retired, I say I'm inspired. I want to be more intentional about God's calling on my life. I have the extraordinary blessing of both time and more than adequate resources. Yet with both comes equally extraordinary responsibility. I'm taking much more seriously the bold and crystal clear words of Jesus when he said, "To whom much has been given, much will be expected." That's a big gulp for all of us here, especially in Edina. I want to slow down, I want to be more thoughtful, and I want to pray more. I want to be less busy and more available to friends and family. And my own medical issues have helped me immensely with my faith. Again, my problems have called the biggest question of all: what do I believe in? In this process, I've come to realize that the word faith is a very benign term. It can mean everything, and it can mean nothing. It's overused and doesn't mean much. But if you substitute the word trust for faith, it really does call a big question. Pretty high stakes, again, for all of us. And with both Chris and my medical adventures, I've learned that yes, I do trust what I believe. Interesting, it's now been 2 years since getting the 10 years heads up. So do I plan on 8? I kind of like to think I get to reboot. In fact, I think I'm going to reboot right here. I think I get to reboot each year as I try to determine what's truly important in a world where everything is urgent and not much important. Pondering my 10-year plan, I realize how busy I always am. Busy, busy, busy. We all are, right? I had a conversation with a friend in passing, and it went something like this, familiar to all of you. Hey, Ward, how are you doing? Fine. Bill, how are you doing? Great. Yeah. So how are you? Good, good. How about you? Yeah, great. Your family good? Yeah, fine. How about yours? Died in a fiery car crash. Great. Good to see you. Yeah. But at the end of that mindless banter, he said, so are you busy? And I said, no. I mean, it looked at his face struck. He said, what's wrong? I said, nothing's wrong. He goes, well, is business okay? Business never been better. So you're not busy? No. I challenge everybody, try that. Everybody you run into as part of this banner is going to be, are you busy? Just say, no, I'm really not. And just see what happens. We're told by the world to be busy, but we're programmed by God to be relevant. One of my closest friends and a mentor to me of many years is a member of a prayer group that has been meeting out west every Tuesday morning for 15 years. He shared with our group the tragedy of having lost his wife of 37 years, who died in his arms when she was 59. It was as deeply moving as it was sadly tragic. It was way, way beyond powerful. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. And it was quite a sight to witness 12 grown men openly weeping at 7 a.m. He then paused and said, I'm very moved by your sadness. I take it as a sign of your love and concern for me. But the most important thing I will ever say to any of you ever is this. Every single one of you will experience this. it will either be your spouse or you. So get ready. When people say to Chris and I that we dodged a bullet, I always smile and I say, no, it was just postponed a little bit. So my message today is as obvious as it is profound. All of us are going to die. As the saying goes, nobody's getting out of this world alive. Get ready. Thank you. The question was, if I understand it, is that as part of making peace towards the end of your life, do you emphasize hope or forgiveness or?
Relatedness, forgiveness.
Yeah, I think. First of all, again, I really need to stress this: is I'm not going anywhere. I just had my checkup. I mean, I'm doing fine. I'm skiing double black diamonds and Telluride, and so this really is an intellectual exercise. But in response to your question, I think both. I think lacking either of those things, either lacking hope. Hope is, again, a very benign. It's kind of a stupid word, really, until you realize that the definition of hope from the Greek is confident expectation, and that's critical. You lose hope, you've kind of lost everything. Forgiveness is another form of cancer. Lack of forgiveness will eat you up worse than any disease that I know of. And I see situations where there's a lack of forgiveness, and it's a mess. So I would say both of those are extremely important, and lack of one would be a big problem. The community, meaning
Our community, whether it be here, or whether it be your Bible study type smaller groups. In other words, what role does community play?
well, again, I think that our society kind of ignores death. They don't like to think about it. I remember when Chris was dying, and dying for sure, people were feeling so bad, and I say, well, you're going too. I may be going in a few weeks, but you're right behind me, baby. I think in terms of from a literal sense, I think a small group these small groups that meet, the one that I've been part of, is absolutely critical, particularly in our society, because nobody wants to do that, because we're all macho men, right? I mean, America, we can just do it on our own, right? I can go it along. I don't need nobody, no how, nowhere, until your life starts falling apart, and you realize that if you've got a group of trusted brothers and sisters who've developed a close relationship around a shared faith, it becomes immeasurably valuable. So, just a group of people that meet regularly that can talk about important things. I'm so sick and tired of conversations, most of them on the golf course. I mean, it's just stupid stuff everybody's talking about. Well, on Tuesday morning, it's not stupid. It's never, never, never stupid. And having the ability to be able to talk about serious issues that you wouldn't probably be comfortable talking about in other situations is a blessing, really an incredible gift. Absolutely, and those hands, we don't get to see how those hands necessarily play out. That purpose-driven life, by the way, the purpose-driven life by Rick Warren, he's subsequently become a good friend of mine, and I had admitted this to him, is that my wife came home and she said, I got a book for you to read. Well, anytime, at least my wife says, I got a book for you to, she's got her toolkit out. She's trying to fix me. I said, look, I got my own books. I have my own books to read. I've got plenty of books. You read it. And she goes, I already did. and I think you ought to read it. And I said, I'm not going to read it. Give it away, throw it away. Anyway, I come home, and there on my nightstand, this never happens, by the way, but the bed's kind of turned down nice, and the light's just so, there's a little candle, and there on my pillow, The Purpose-Driven Life. So I pick up the book, and I open it. First chapter, first sentence, it's not about you. And as I told Warren, you could have stopped the book right there. I mean, that just absolutely flattened me. I mean, the idea that that particular book, which is the best-selling book of all time outside of the Bible in America and around the world, people just flooding to buy this book. Because why? Because we all want to know, why are we here? We all want to know, what is our purpose for being here? And it's not about you. It's pretty powerful. I would say Africa for me. I had really a spectacular gift given to me in 1993 when Arthur brought me. Actually, it wasn't that much kicking and pulling. It was a little, though. And I realized that I'd become an eyewitness. I'd become an eyewitness to all of a sudden starvation and disease and all these horrible things that we read about were real. I saw them. Made me mad. Bob Pierce from World Vision says, "Let your heart be broken by the things that break the heart of God." I've changed that a little bit, and I say, let's get mad about the things that make God mad and the injustice that takes place all over the planet. Provided me with a purpose. I mean, I do know what my purpose is, and it's to be a vocal advocate for the poor in Africa. And that doesn't happen very often. Usually, scratching your head or you change your mind or something happens. It's been 30 years, so that's been a great gift. I'll never forget that, and I'll never be able to repay Arthur for encouraging me on that adventure. I know he'd warned me that the hook's coming, so I'm gonna, is there one more?
Sure, one more.
One more. You shared last time, but would you mind sharing with us, being we're on that subject, your first meaningful, real prayer that you shared with us last time?
Okay. I'm at the airport. I'm with a bunch of church people. These ladies, church ladies, are hugging me. I'm outside the gate. This is pre-security, where you could actually have people see you off at the gate. And Arthur Rauner suggests that we say a prayer. So I'm bowing my head, and the next thing I know, I feel this. I don't know what it is. Well, it's actually these people. We're holding hands. And so this was my first prayer ever. Dear God, don't let any of my friends see me here.
Word, I don't know when I've heard a more relevant, important, inspiring, and heartfelt presentation before our club. And it is a coincidence that I operate a hospice. But I want you to know that when it comes to end-of-life issues, people mark time differently, and the precious and brevity of life is just elevated to a station that others don't appreciate. And we sure enjoyed your comments today. I also want you to know that this group of people here join a group of 1.2 million fellow Rotarian leaders around the world that are united worldwide to provide humanitarian service to people who need it. Locally, there's an organization called VEEP that has a more domestic vision for helping underserved populations. And in honor of your presentation today, we're going to make a gift to them for your fine work.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all our guests and visiting Rotarians. We appreciate all of you coming today. And we hope we gave you a sense of our club and perhaps a reason for you to come back to another meeting and perhaps eventually join us as a member. We have another great program next week that you won't want to miss. Mark Furman, Program Director, Rail Projects for Metro Transit, will be here to talk about the proposed Southwest Rail Transit that will run from Eden Prairie to downtown Minneapolis. I will close with a quote from Edward Cadman, who served as Rotary International President in 1985-86 and was from a club in Washington. In speaking on the key to Rotarian service, he said, "Rotarians in one part of the globe can affect lives on the opposite side of the world. We have the desires and the capabilities to give help where help is needed. Where there is a starving child, a weeping mother, Rotary can be there. Where there is polio, a crooked limb, a need for medicine, Rotary can be there. Where there is a sigh of the lonely, the despair of the isolated, Rotary can be there. Rotary is the sanctity of fellowship, of brotherhood, the warmth of trust. Rotary is a vision, yet struck in stone. We build not only in concrete, but also in lives and in futures." Have a great week, and remember to light up Rotary. Meeting adjourned.